Hello, everybody. It's Friday. That means it's time for another topic of the week. First off, preamble on last week's topic. Lots of good responses. As usual, all of those will be listed down below. I especially liked Victor's response. I thought his was really nice. As always, Victor always has some great, thoughtful responses to the topic of the week. So, really good. Really glad to see that. Check it out. Last week's video, as always, it's down there. You can see it. There, look, wait. There it is. See, I can see it down there. You probably can too. So, let's turn to this week's topic because I'm excited about this one. And this week's topic is going to be about change in games. So, the recent release of 1.2 and the large changes that happened with that in the Ninth Age, and just the experiences of the past year in gaming have made me think a lot about change in games. It is often, a very tumultuous, anger-filled, rant-filled, nerd rage time whenever a major change comes to a game. And I was thinking about the nature of change in games and why it's there. And I have a starting premise, and that is that games must change or they die. There are a very few sort of near perfect games, near enough that they don't really have to change or evolve. These are oftentimes games that have just sort of stood the test of time. Chess is a good easy go-to example, checkers, but even so, people do create variations on these games and play them in different ways. But for everything else, everything outside of the 0.001%, any game that relies on a large construct of rules with settings and stuff like that, change has to happen. And the reason for that is because some part of playing a game is exploration. It's exploration of the way that the various components of the game interact, the way that your chosen components interact with your opponent or opponent's chosen components, the way that the game plays out, the results of interacting with the game. All of that is exploration and discovery. Now, different people have different sort of psychographic profiles on how much that exploration matters to them. Okay? If you're like well into Timmy, as I've discussed before, then your goal is to experience something. And so exploration tends to be fairly important for you. If you're a Johnny, where you want to express something, well, then exploration is usually pretty important too, because you want to explore and find those secret combinations and hidden ways to connect or prove your intelligence that other people hadn't thought of. Spike is really the only one who doesn't care. He just wants to win. This is a vehicle for that. So exploration doesn't matter much. So the nature of exploration is necessary because games are finite, right? There's a certain amount of things you can basically do. Now, it's true you're not going to encounter every dice roll or every exact situation, but I'm sure you've played an army long enough, or, it doesn't even have to be in Warhammer or some analog to tabletop wargaming. I'm positive you have played some game enough to feel like you've pretty much felt all that there is to feel that the game is going to make you enjoy. Video games are a great example of this, right? Where you just play them and you sort of explore them and you're done. And how often do you go back and play many games that you played 10 years ago? In fact, let's play a challenge if you like. Let's do a little challenge if you like video games. Name to me your favorite game of 2005 without looking at the internet for a list of games that were released in 2005. Go ahead. I'm going to guess most of you just didn't answer me, because they're very forgettable. The problem with oftentimes like released games, digital games, is that they, up until recently, were a very static thing. Now with downloadable content and all that, there's a whole different discussion there. But with tabletop games, how they've tended to evolve, whether they be RPGs or CCGs or war games, is they're released. People play them, explore them, choose their armies, explore their armies. Once you've kind of gotten a feel, you've played most of the units, you've played lots of different opponents, you've seen the game, you've played lots of the scenarios. Once you've mapped all these out, right? Once there's no more hidden corners on the map and there's nothing else to explore, you start to lose people. So the lack of things to explore is one of the causations of churn. Churn is a thing that happens in games. I've talked about it before in videos. And every year, I've never seen hard figures on this. The few people I've talked to that have done some looking into it, the number seems to be around 20%. So an average game, successful game, I should say, a successful game will lose about 20% of its player base every year. Okay, year over year. 1 in 5 people who are playing will not be playing at this time next year. That's for a successful game. Less successful games will bleed a lot more. So what that means is that you got to find new people to replace that, or you got to try to stave off that churn, right? By introducing new elements, changing additions, introducing new rules, new armies, new stuff, things to hopefully keep people hooked, right? Keep them interested. So that's why change is necessary, because we all need it. We all need it in some way to keep interested. Maybe your tolerance is longer. Maybe you can go deeper, right? Maybe you could play some of the same stuff for 4 or 5 years and remain interested. But there's another person over here who's going to leave in 8 months. And to the maker of a game, trying to balance that equation is really tough, right? To where you change often enough to keep enough people interested, but you're stable enough not to make the change itself a reason why people leave, because that's the dark side of this, right? If you churn too much, if you turn over rules too much, you're going to churn people harder. So it's a real tightrope to watch. And what's always interesting to me is that people really get angry at change in games, oftentimes just because it's change. By that, what I mean is, even if they didn't, I think people over emotionally invest sometimes in changes. And they react too quickly. Because the thing isn't the thing that they used to know, it's bad. This you see, like, if you played Warhammer for a long time, you saw this every edition change, but that's not alone. Like, if you've played any game, I made a video once on these massive changes that were supposed to bring down the games and failed. Mark Rosewater wrote a great article of like 10 changes that were supposed to kill Magic, right? That everybody heralded as like the end of Magic. This change is it. It's all over now. This massive change was ridiculous. The players are going to flee in droves. Magic's more successful than it ever has been. So change is good, but that doesn't mean it's easy. I think it's one of those things that's really tough. And I think that we as players do often react negatively to it, justifiably so, because it is hard. It is the type of thing that you don't want to have happening all the time. There is a comfort to things, and even if everybody wants some things to change, but not everybody wants the same things to change. And that's the problem, right? Because for every one thing you get that you do want, you get 5 others that other people wanted, but you didn't. And then you get these bad feelings. So I think that what I would like, my sort of thought on this is, I think once you come to terms and realize that change is a necessary part of the game design and game development process, and of a game's life cycle, that actually makes the game a better experience for you in the long run. Now, that's on average, right? Games can change and get worse. There can be bad, terrible changes that need to be undone or rolled back or forgotten about. That happens, okay? I'm not going to say certain times I thought that happened. You probably have your own. But the only true test of that is, does the game die or does the change get rolled back? Not your personal opinion. My personal opinion doesn't matter for crap on whether or not that was true. All that matters is how does the market respond to that game, right? And if the game changes and people abandon it in droves, if that truly does happen, which has happened with several games, I think in many RPGs, this has really happened with a couple RPGs where companies had to like backpedal hard on very sweeping changes they made to games that just killed the game. So I think but once you see that for the most part, change as a thing is good and makes games healthier and longer lasting. I think that if you kind of keep that in your head, it can be easier to survive some of the other changes and to take them all as just a temporary thing. I think back to the words of wisdom of like, this too shall pass, right? And like that's going to be true of every change. I think when we look at it, we often see it as like, this is the new forever state of being. No, this is the new way it is for some short amount of time, somewhere that's probably counted in a few years, because everything in more or less these games is actually quite quickly turning over compared to, say, most of the rest of the world. So there you go. That's my thoughts on change. What I want for all of you for this week is, what do you think of changes in games? How often do you like to see new elements introduced? Do you feel like you lean towards stability over that sort of dynamism and change? What are some of your favorite changes that have happened in games where it turned out a lot better? And what are some of the worst and ones that you thought were negative? I'd be very interested in this. I really am. And if you don't want to make a response video, I'd love to put it down in the comments. Although, as always, if you do make a response video, then that video will be linked down in the description. Because I think this is one of the toughest things that I have thought about in my game design career. Because it's so hard sitting on this side as a designer to hit the right cadence with this. So I'll be very interested in everyone's feedback. So I very much look forward to that. Forward to your thoughts on change. Change that we can believe in. As always, we'll see you next time.